It's definitely interesting.
All right. Good morning, everyone.
Sweet.
Right. Let's see. We'll get started here in just a second, doing a little bit of housekeeping and letting some folks in the room, in the virtual room. And then panelists, I'm going to go ahead and spotlight all of you. Sorry, Sharon, you had to go first on that one.
Thanks.
Okay, spotlight next. Laura. Looks like we still have some folks trickling in here. While we're waiting, feel free to hop into the chat, introduce yourself, add your LinkedIn profiles. We'd love to know who's here. This is always that slightly awkward part of the webinar when when we're kind of waiting for things to get started.
Usually it's like, well, I guess not, maybe it's in the morning, it's coffee and snacks, right? As you're kind of moving into the kickoff. And then if it's an evening event, it's cocktails, right? And then you go into the panel session.
That's version 2.0, right? Everyone that attends the happy hour gets one sent to their house. Really be up in the game with the emergence of the digital and the physical.
That's a great idea.
All right, I am just going to go ahead and get our welcome message going, and I'll just simultaneously be letting folks in the room as I do that. Hello, my name is Katrina Tolentino, and I'm the Executive Director at Naturally Austin. Welcome to the Leadership and Culture event. Really excited for this conversation, and we'd love to see who's here to help you all connect. So feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, add your LinkedIn. You'll see me adding you a little bit later in the event. And if you're new to Naturally Austin, we are the industry hub for consumer goods here in Central Texas. We offer community, connection, learning opportunities, and most importantly, we make the community of resources transparent and accessible to anyone that needs support in the consumer goods ecosystem. Naturally Austin is one of 8 chapters that's part of the Naturally Network, and I want to just take a couple of minutes to introduce Sharon, Reddice, Executive Director of the network. Sharon, can you kick us off?
You bet. Thanks, Katrina. On behalf of the entire Naturally community of over 5,000 members and 20,000 community supporters, thank you for joining us today. As Katrina said, we have 8 chapters across the U.S. and we're expanding. And as we continue to expand, we're really all focused on our core mission, which is to really advance and champion this wide-ranging ecosystem that makes up the natural and organics industry. And you see some of it today with our speakers. We're thrilled to be partnering with Naturally Austin to bring these leaders together to talk about a topic that's on so many of our minds these days, and that's culture. Why should you care about culture? I came across a couple of statistics, and I'm sure we've seen many more that really say it all. Companies with strong cultures, there's so much data out there. The latest stat I saw showed that companies with strong cultures on average experience a 4 times increase in earnings. And in a recent study, nearly 2/3 of employees listed culture as the most important reason they stay with their current employer or they leave to go work somewhere else. And I can share from my personal experience, culture is not something that can be built overnight. It's something that takes time and it takes strong leaders. And Katrina and I were really, how we all came to be here today is a really neat short little story, but Katrina and I were fortunate enough to cross paths with Bolt, which is a very fast, exponentially growing technology organization. And their founder, Ryan Breslow, he gets it. And he understands that success is all about culture. And he was so passionate about creating and nurturing culture that he created a nonprofit, conscious.org, to share Bolt's playbook with the world. And not only does he share this with everyone, but really is focused on creating a community where everyone can share back and share with each other, because this is so important to learn and nurture and not just build, but maintain culture. So needless to say, we were hooked. And their values and passion to help companies thrive aligned so much with what Naturally Network is all about. And we're here today to share all of this wisdom with you all in our community. So huge thanks to Conscious Culture and Force Brands for bringing your valuable insights to our community. They are both sponsors of Naturally Network at the national level, and I know you do so much for our communities, and I want to thank you and thank all of our speakers today for being here and sharing your incredible experience as leaders and folks who really live and breathe culture and the values you've created in your organizations. So just a couple quick housekeeping items. We'd love for everyone to keep their camera on if you're able, and please, we're going to have some time at the end of the panel for questions. So if you can hold your questions till then, great, or put them in the chat and we'll keep track of those and make sure that we cover them when we get to that part of the conversation. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our moderator, Sean Connor, a friend, a board member of Naturally, and co-founder and chief progress officer at Force Brand. And our panelists, Angela McAwee, most recently the CEO of Gaia Herbs, Laura Levinson, Director of Employee Experience at Bolt, thank you, Laura, and Max Bauman, CEO of Basemakers. All members and supporters of Naturally. So thank you for being here today again, and I'm going to turn it over to Sean.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sharon. Really appreciate that amazing introduction. And Katrina, thank you so much for putting this together and the opportunity to share the stage, the virtual stage with Max, Laura, and Angela. So certainly excited about this topic. We at Force Brands work with a lot of brands in CPG and consumer tech and help them connect with incredible leaders in this space. And so one consistent topic that we've seen over the last 14 years of our existence is culture, and building the right culture and building the right team to enact and facilitate the culture. So certainly an exciting topic. And I think a lot of the themes that we're going to talk about today are ones that I think we all can keep in mind as leaders and as we build our company culture. So I'm going to share a few stats that we've did some recent polling on LinkedIn and received about 2,000 to 3,000 responses. And I think it'll just help frame the conversation. I think there's a lot of different ways you can think about culture, but certainly what's been consistent, at least from my perspective, it's intentional, it's purpose. So again, we're going to talk a little bit about that. But one poll we recently, actually a few months ago, shared with our community is on mental health. And the respondents shared that only a third of employers provide mental health support. And out of those respondents that actually provide mental health support, 57% are actually offering the gift of time. So whether it's unlimited vacation days or more PTO or mandatory time off, which we actually did within our own company. And 27% of employees said their employers are actually helpful in balancing work, burnout, and pandemic fatigue. So again, there's just a lot of opportunity for there. And I think as we're thinking about building culture and engaging our teams, certainly something to keep in mind. Another poll that we shared, and this is around purpose, engaging your teams, engaging your employees. And one of the most significant topics over the last year and a half has been diversity and inclusion. And respondents share that 73% of employees are inspired more than ever to work for companies that make social impact as a priority. So again, as you're thinking about culture and team building. Leaders are very intentional in moving, and mobilizing their teams to a greater cause. And then another area that we've shared and seen within our community is just reimagining the workplace. As we're moving to this digital age, and we don't necessarily have teams within the office. Maybe there's a hybrid approach. Maybe you have teams in your facility, but how are they staying connected? And so transparency continues to come up. And 28% of companies, or respondents share that 28% of the companies are really not transparent at all, which is, again, it's been challenging as we've gone through this pandemic and moving through an endemic. So I'm going to turn it over to the panelists, and would love to kind of hear their thoughts on culture. And maybe I'll start with you, Max, as incredible CEO and founder of your business. I'm sure you have some thoughts and ideas on what you've gone through in terms of building your company culture. So we'd love to hear from you. Just your thoughts on.
Yeah, absolutely. Culture is a journey. It's not something that you come to overnight. It's something that you intentionally build. And that was something that really has been my learning journey over the last decade. Is when I first got in, I just had the assumption that culture was something that was a byproduct of success. And it was a byproduct of being with a winning product or winning company. And the more that you win, the more the culture will rise. And there was one person in my life that really made that clear, that culture is something that you intentionally put down and you build. And that person was Mike Gervais, who is the high performance psychologist for the Seattle Seahawks, working with Pete Carroll. And the Seattle Seahawks have an incredible conscious culture. And their big thing is around it's people, and it's about people, and it's about process. So how are you going to blend those two things together to be who you want to be as a unit? So his big thing was focus on the individual, caring about the person, giving that individual attention. And he had 3 rules that really stuck out. 1, be early. And be early means that you care, you're showing up early for practice, you want to go for championships. No whining and no excuses. And those are one of the things that you think about and you go, okay, venting, and there's a total big thing for vent, because I do believe that there's such a thing called toxic positivity, where people can't be transparent and honest. But in the description is if you always give an excuse, you'll always have an out. So you're not going to create transparency and accountability. And then the last one was always have your teammates back. Go to bat for them, because that creates more trust. And trust is really the language of culture. So that's kind of the journey that I'm starting to see. And the other big thing is, and I'll pass it off because I know we're going to go through a couple different questions. Super passionate about this topic. Mm-hmm. The other big thing around it is trust, or culture isn't just up to the CEO. It's not just up to HR. It's up to each different individual team member. And one painful learning lesson that we had is when we were scaling the business, and in 1 year we hired 18 different people. And across these people, we really didn't have good recruiting practices at that time in place to ensure, were they a great cultural fit? Were they additive? Can we trust them? And are we doing the right background checks on both character and competence? Because if they get in the role, it's so much more expensive. I believe the stats 30% of the new hires cost is when you have a bad turnover within that. So yeah, that was the big learning lesson that we had a while ago. And we now have a very strict recruiting process to get in, because we want to guard and protect the culture.
Awesome. Really great. I took some good notes on that. Thanks, Max. Angela, I'll turn it over to you as a former CEO and current advisor to many leaders in the consumer space. I mean, what are some of the things that maybe you talk to your partners about when building and thinking about culture?
Yeah, Max, I love what you said about hiring. And I think this is really critical. As leaders and CEOs, traditionally, we have been in the mindset of hiring for technical skills. And this is also a diversity issue as well. When we look at a candidate, we think, what are their technical skills, their hard skills? I think we're shifting to a work environment where we have to look at their adaptive problem solving instead of just their technical skills. And adaptive problems are those that require a shift in mindset. So if you're trying to solve an adaptive problem, you can't do it because you're a great engineer. You have to do it in a way that draws on what are traditionally called soft skills. If you have a team full of people who can flex that adaptive problem solving muscle instead of just technical problem solving, then you're building a culture of emotional intelligence. So that was a lesson that we learned. You can't just hire for those technical skills. You have to think about, can this person come into an environment and help solve problems that require them to change the way they're thinking about something, which is much harder, right? And I think too, the role of the CEO has shifted over the last decade, and we're really seeing a reckoning right now. Traditional CEO archetype was very Jack Welch, sort of, command and control, and there are still CEOs who practice that. I think we're entering a phase where people really want approachability. They want a CEO who, instead of work comes first, it's a recognition that life comes first, and actually your work dovetails with that beautifully. So, a lot of the CEOs, the founders that I work with, are building that muscle. Like, right, I'm a human first. I don't have to be unapproachable. I can be vulnerable. I can encourage that in my teams, and we can still kick ass and get results. The two, can coexist.
That's amazing. And sorry, that's my little one in the background.
Well, see, it's approachability and vulnerability.
Exactly.
We're just demonstrating it.
No, Angela, those definitely amazing thoughts. I took some notes and want to circle back to some of those. But before we do, Laura, we've talked to, Angela, Max, I even mentioned culture is intentional. It's purpose, right? I mean, would love to get your perspective on building a conscious culture and how essentially it can manifest itself within the culture of a company.
Yeah. And I love what you both said so far, and Sean, what you said too. To kind of piggyback a little bit on what Max said, as far as culture being a journey. Ryan Breslow, our CEO, always talks about having a strong and healthy culture and company only happens when we have strong and healthy people, that we really need to make sure that the people feel good when they're at work, that we're taking care of them as much as they're investing in our company. And to that point, I feel like we need to make sure that people feel, that as much as you would invest in your health every day, like if you're trying to be healthy as a person, you're not going to make a plan and then just say, okay, I'm healthy. You have to work on it every day. And culture is the same way. It's something that we have to really consciously think about. What are our decisions that we're making, making sure that we're really, just making sure that we're checking in with people and taking care of them as much as they're taking care of the company. And I do think that, Sean, what you spoke to earlier, as far as mental health, I know that Ryan Breslow also talks about trying to look at people in more of a holistic way, trying to make sure that we're not just thinking about having high performers, that we're really making sure that people feel good about the work experience that they get when they come to Bolt, that they know what they're signing up for what work is going to actually feel like. So yeah, I have a lot more to say, but I just wanted to piggyback on those two pieces from what you all said.
Absolutely. And Laura, you mentioned it. Angela, you just talked about it, and Max, you as well. How the really isn't one person responsible for culture, but ultimately it's the leaders, it's the management. I mean, we'd love to kind of hear, like, how do you get everyone on board and bought in to culture? and the culture you are trying to build?
Yeah, I can share. I mean, I'm sure we all have examples, and Sean, I'm sure you do too. I do, everyone owns culture. I mean, you want that to be present in every level of the organization. I am a strong believer, though, that the CEO and the executive team have to model it in order for that to be an acceptable behavior and norm. I mean, you're setting norms. Okay, let me look and see, like, what does it take to get ahead in this organization? What does success look like? And in some ways, interestingly enough, we've all struggled through the last 18 months, but one of the, we'll call it a silver lining, is that we're all a little bit more human as a result. Like, I had employees who I hired who I never met in person, but I knew their kids. I knew their wife, I knew their husband, I'd seen their pets. So we're all human. Like, we show up for work, and in some ways we're present in this bubble. The last 18 months has removed that in a lot of ways. So I think, I mean, personally, I have tried consistently to model that by saying, hey, I can't continue. I have to stop at this time because I need to go pick my kids up today. This is important to them. You're showing them it's okay to care about things, and set some boundaries that are healthy, and you can still, do a great job as well.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I mean, I've heard the term the Great Resignation recently, and it talks about how there was over 4 million workers that actually quit their jobs in the month of July alone, and people are really taking a step back and evaluating what's important to them, what's important kind of after they go home from work, but also how are they actually engaged at work and what's meaningful for them during the day. So, you talk about, purpose. I think now more than ever, people are searching for it. So yeah, no, it's definitely, good point to me, Max, as you've built your company and got, currently scaling it pretty rapidly and hiring many people. I mean, is there anything that you are assessing as you're bringing new people into the company and culture? You're on mute. Sorry.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of culture, of how we assess, it all comes down to two things, really, when we're looking at who we're bringing on. It's vision and values. They need to have need to see the vision of what we're trying to achieve. Otherwise, on a long enough timeline, if they're not excited about that, and that's not something that compels them to go forward, then you end up with a situation where they might be better fit following a different vision. And then values, here are our company values. We have an acronym, PITCH. We're a sales company, so it's a nice little acronym for us: pursue excellence, integrity, teamwork, communication, and heart. And those are the things that we hire off. We do, write-ups off. We validate. We actually have a software that we just installed where different team members can award points, which can be used either as cash or gift prizes for people who really demonstrate those values on a regular basis. So now we're giving the power of acknowledgement, feedback, and sharing it across the team. So we're trying to create more of a flat organization where everyone is accountable, and we're all trying to build this together and model these great behaviors with each other. And the other big thing is in that pitch, in those early meetings, when you talk about your values, is to ask them about theirs, and ask them about different stories in their life where you overcome adversities, where you see what you're made of. And that's where you see where the character comes up. So around adversity, around failures, and when they're coming on, in their previous experience, how were they able to demonstrate their values and what values are close to them? And then you can see how that correlates with the company values. So around overall fit, is this person going to be, someone that represents pitch in our case? And are they excited about the vision? And if those two things are yes, then we're ready to go.
Awesome. Sign me up. Well, Laura, I see you shaking your head in agreement.
Just to piggyback on what they said
Yeah.
again, I think people are being pickier in a good way more than ever about where they work. And you have to have a workplace that feels like it works for your life and that you're aligned with what the company is actually doing. I think before we were all remote, before we were hybrid, and doing this sort of thing for work, I know that a lot of companies operated by more of a traditional model where you check yourself at the door, you just show up for a paycheck, you're not really showing up as your full self, and then you go back to your personal life after work. And now my kid could also walk in at any point. We have our personal lives are really woven into the workday. And I think people really get that they want to work somewhere where they feel aligned with the values, that they feel aligned with how the company operates, how what they're signing up for as far as how they get treated and how their workday works for them. Like how flexible are the hours? How does the company respect our time? How can we show up? How do we communicate with each other? I think it's a lot of, again, how it feels at work. You have to make sure that you're in the right spot and that you're hiring the right people for what the company vision and day-to-day value expression looks like. So yeah, I fully agree with Max and Angela on that.
Awesome. As businesses go through, certainly an evolution, right? There's different stages of growth. There's different channels that you open up. There's different products you launch. Any recommendations as, reevaluating your culture, reevaluating the values that maybe you've outlined, at the early stages? So I'd love to just open it up.
I would jump in just real quick to say, don't be afraid to take risks and experiment. I know that companies right now are trying new things, and I think that's better for everybody. I know for our company, we're doing some big experiments like trying out 4-day work week and trying things that other companies might feels maybe too big for other companies to try. But we've even been doing things like sprinkling in wellness days unexpectedly after a really big push for the company, or adding in extra benefits. I know Sean, spoke about, again, mental health, but looking at offerings that we can give to our employees around, hey, here's some mindfulness classes, here are some extra resources, here's a mentorship program in-house. There are things that you can do and experiment with to see what's going to best support your team. So I would just say, be open to new ideas.
I totally agree with that. And I mean, if you think about it, we're in CPG. We lead CPG organizations or teams. This is, without innovation in CPG, we die. And so why aren't we applying that same ethos to our cultural and our team building? That should be a place where we have permission to innovate as leaders. We have permission to say, even, our values, 5 years ago, they were this, and actually it feels like we've grown through these, and we need to look at how we update these to reflect the culture we want to be now. I think that's a place where there's been a lot of stagnation, and also a lot of fear. Like, am I going to mess it up? Am I going to do it wrong? Like, Laura, to your point, like the idea of experimenting with a 4-day work week, I think for many employers is terrifying. Like, oh my gosh, I mean, I can think of some responses I've heard to that one in particular that weren't on the I want to lean into that side. But what if it surprises you? And, that's the mindset we have as leaders, creating products and testing them for channels and marketplaces and consumers. Like, that's the same mindset we can use, the same muscles we already have.
Awesome.
100%. And to piggyback off what Laura was saying, I love the phrase work-life harmony, right? There's always been this mindset that your work life is separate from your personal life. None of us have two lives. We just have one life. So it's about how do we have that mindset where our work is cohesive and it gives us energy and we have feelings of accomplishment for our personal life, and our personal life relaxes us, connects us with different people in our community, and kind of unwinds us so we can go back to our work life with energy and enthusiasm. So I love the 4-day work week from Ryan and your team. I think that's awesome, and that's a big risk obviously for the company, but I think it also shows that innovation's at the core of your company. You guys are innovating a checkout that is, democratizing the one-click checkout for shoppers, and how do you bring that innovation into your culture too? So it validates what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, we've prior to the pandemic, we've had offices and the kegerator and a lot of the celebration and community around just getting together. Pandemic hit and changed all that, and now we've had to find ways to connect. But ultimately, we actually experimented with the 4-day work week over the summer, and we found that people, again, were just more intentional with their days, their 4 days. And they felt like they had the flexibility and freedom for the weekend. So highly recommend it. I was also very fearful for our company, but it is something that organically actually came up and worked out pretty well.
Yeah, Sean, I think it gets back to, you brought up the Great Resignation, and I think we've probably all, seen a lot about that. And the thing I keep thinking as I see that phrase is it really misses the heart of the matter. It's trivializing it in a way that I think doesn't get at what's really going on. Like, people are resigning from jobs that leave them feeling disconnected from themselves, from their families, from their purpose. They're not just checking out entirely, most of them, from the workplace. They're looking for an alternative that helps them feel more whole. And, I think whether it's a 4-day work week or whatever it is, there's a bunch of different ways that are true to our own organizations that can show up and be true. And those are the places they're going to win culturally. They're going to build teams that have people that actually are like, I want to be here. I want to be part of this.
Just to piggyback on that too, just because I love what you just said. I know that we hear this a lot at Bolt, that Ryan, I mean, he's a lot like you too, that whether you talk to him in a panel like this, or you talk to him, on Zoom one-on-one, he's the same person. And I feel like people are really hoping to not only be able to be themselves at work, but they want to be able to trust their leaders. And to be able to get that from leaders, they have to really bring authenticity. And I think trust comes up a lot when people talk about, okay, we're working virtually, we're experimenting with different ways of working together. We have to be able to trust our workforce. And I always tell leaders from an HR perspective, the team takes cues from your behavior and your example. And so it's kind of like parenting. You can say one thing, but if you do another, your kid's going to copy what you do, not what you say. And I think for leaders, the more they understand that, and the more that they really live what they want to see in their companies, people trust that, and you find more alignment that way, and people get on board for things that you want to try as a company. So I just wanted to talk about trust.
Trust is certainly important. One area that we've seen hit, or one group or segment that's been hit the hardest during the pandemic is our working moms, right? And you talk about building an inclusive culture. It's been certainly a challenge for many moms or parents and employers. I mean, would love to just open it up and kind of hear some thoughts, strategies, ideas on how you've been able to kind of keep that in mind as you build your culture.
I mean, as a mom, I can maybe speak to this too. I know, Angela, you are too, and I would say even for dads, for parents, I know my husband has had to step up and deal with a lot of the same stuff that I'm having to navigate. Sorry, notifications. I would say this is also a time where leaders can step in to exemplify. Angela, like you said, if you can be clear that, hey, I can't take that call right now, or I have to take care of my kids. This is, I'm getting dinner with my kids. I think being vocal about boundaries around family time. I've had a stint in this company where I've reported to the general counsel, and he will always emphasize family comes first. You know, make sure if my daughter is sick or she's having a bad day and she needs extra attention, I feel that support because it's explicit.
Mhm.
And I do also know internally I've worked at smaller companies, and I've worked mostly with younger men who might not understand what having a kid is like. And I know at our company right now at Bolt, we have a caregivers group along with a whole bunch of other groups, but you can find community within your work. You can carve out groups like that so that people can share experiences, share learnings, share tips and tricks for, you know, how are you navigating your day? What have you found works for you? And we found that to be really helpful at Bolt to create a connection there and a support internally for moms and dads.
Yeah, those are great. I mean that I think there's so many ways to acknowledge working parents and how hard it's been. One is, Laura, as you said, to be explicit about it. And really, I mean, you know, last year, I remember having all staff meetings that were virtual, and, you know, having my kids interrupt them. You have 300 employees, and here comes the 6-year-old, like, look at this art, you know, and, you know, your first instinct is like, oh my God.
Mhm.
But instead, you know, take those moments and sort of lean into them, and you're showing your employees, hey, it's fine, it happens. I mean, I'll never forget, actually, as a my husband and I have 4 daughters, and they're older now. The oldest is 16, the youngest is 6. But when the 6-year-old was still nursing, I sometimes on site would conduct interviews, like, and I would have to nurse. And I was covered, but, you know, I'm nursing, and I had multiple working mothers, like, within our organization to comment, like, you know, thank you. I feel like I have permission to be a mom, and, like, not feel like I have to apologize to go pump. And so I think, you know, look, if you're a parent and you're showing people that you care about that and that's important, you know, that's one way. If you're not a parent, just, you know, acknowledging and expressing that, like, hey, it's okay. If you need to go right now, go. This is more important. People want to work in those environments. Yeah, I care about this a lot. This is a topic, I think, especially, Sharon, to your point, for women who often are the primary caregivers, but, you know, yes, for dads too. So.
Yeah, thanks for shouting us dads out. As a father of
Yeah.
2 and a third on the way, you know, definitely, you know, share the burden. But I just know specifically over the pandemic, I mean, women have given up their jobs because there wasn't, you know, that support. So really, really, really great points.
Yeah. And
Okay.
one thing too, that
Yeah,
just to add on, thinking through it, and one of the big things that happened during pandemic early on in 2020 was like finding places for caregiving, you know, and where, like, because for us, it's a remote job, you know, it's field sales. So if you're a single mom, and normally the places where you drop off your kid and pick them up are all shut down, it changes the game. So that was one big thing that we immediately, like, found out within our organization. We reached out to them and we asked them, like, hey, how can we best support you? And we found out in certain cases it was helping support payment for the caregiving, and we invested in that. And if you looked at it, you're like, okay, this doesn't really make sense right off the cuff financially, but in the long term, that's who you are as a company, and that's an investment in your identity and your brand. And also it feels like the right thing to do. So not everything is going to line up for the P&L. And that's, I think, the big key thing as a CEO or as senior leadership. What expenses do you approve and deny? Is your every single approval or every single denial is a vote of who you want to be. And obviously you want to be profitable as an organization, but this is where that people over profit will take the reins sometimes when you make those decisions.
Awesome. Really, really good points, Max. I know we have a question from the audience, and I'll just kind of share with the group. So, have your companies tried individual contracts per employee to accommodate their life and work needs, or is it better to just be open? I think we spoke a little bit about that, but if there's any thoughts around that, we'd love to hear them.
I mean, I will say that we try to address the team and the company as a whole to find out what would best support them. And so we do a lot of outreach for the collective, but we do have teammates that come to us, especially HR, to ask for accommodations or to say, you know, I have a unique situation, or I'm going through a divorce, or I mean, there's a whole slew of things that people have gone through this year, and we've let them know, please come to us. We can always see what we can do. And I think that leaves at least the door open for people to know that they can come talk to us and we can have some flexibility there. I think that they know. I mean, Ryan Breslow is a lot like you all. I feel like you all would get along with him really well if you don't know him already. But he's always wanting to put people first and letting people know that Max, like you said, you know, we want to vote for our people, but we want to make sure that we're giving them the right benefits and that we're helping support them the best we can. And sometimes there are unique situations. So I think I would say in our case, as long as people feel comfortable approaching us, that's where we handle those one-off cases and can make exceptions for people. But I think giving them that flexibility is really key right now.
Yeah, autonomy, that's the key word. Is if you want an individualized plan, what generally would that be if you're addressing a whole organization? And it's usually around autonomy, is how can you trust me to do my job and get my results done for the company within the parameters of what I have. So what we've implemented is flexible work hours. So if someone has something that comes up on Friday that they have to attend to, they have the whole month where they can make up that day on a separate day. So that's one of the big things that our team members have really appreciated.
Awesome. Angela, you talked initially about building a culture that has a high emotional intelligence and, you know, the adaptive problem solving. For those in the audience that are just curious to kind of hear, like, how do you assess that? How do you promote that? Any, you know, tactics, recommendations for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think first you have to start where you are, right? So if you're leading a team or an organization and you're not there, you don't have a team of adaptive problem solvers, you may not have a team that values EQ, then okay, that's where you start. Like, so you have to, I mean, I remember, you know, having meetings where I had a culture, I was, you know, leading a team where those things weren't first and foremost what was valued. And so where I started there was, I mean, we would do, you know, assessments, and there's a bunch of good ones, whether it's Myers-Briggs or Insights, where people are taking assessments to help them understand themselves and their own working style and how they interact with their teammates under stress when things are good. And that's a very safe way to sort of self-inquiry, like look at what works, like how might I react if I interact with someone of a different style. And there's no wrong, which is a great way to approach it. You're not telling people how they can be. Every style is right. It's just how you show up and flex your own style to meet others. So that I have found to be a really good way to start that journey. And then as a leader, I think you start to figure out, like, how do I model this? Like, what is a situation? Okay, I mean, I'm advising a CEO who recently had a bad quarter. It happens to everyone. And, you know, his traditional approach to that would have been sort of come in, like, you know, just like what the bleep, but very sort of traditional, like the beatings will continue till morale improves. And so we talked, and I said, well, tell me what you want to do. And I gave him like a couple different, what if you experimented with one of these three things, whatever feels like you. So he came back and he tried something that was different for him, and his team shocked him. He asked them, what happened this quarter? What went wrong? And they, instead of him telling them, here's all the things that went wrong, they told him, and they also said, here's what we could have done differently. And so that for him was the beginning of a cultural journey where people are beginning to feel like they have permission to acknowledge failure. It's actually celebrated as we learned from this, let's not do it again. So I think those are some steps you can take, but every organization is different.
Mhm.
And Laura, I'm sure you'd have all kinds of great suggestions. Max, you too, but I think there's lots of ways to approach it.
Yeah, or go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah, the things that we're building out right now is we've just hired a new COO, and she comes from a CHRO background. She was a CHRO at PAPS, and we brought her in, which a lot of people, they were asking, okay, you're not bringing a traditional COO in the role. Why? And for me, it's all about the people. It's about what do we really want to embody. And this particular individual was incredible at building conscious cultures. So we got together and we, sat down in a conference room, and we just whiteboarded for a while, and we came up with 4 things we want to be really good at, we want to be known at as an employer. And it was autonomy, the feeling that people were trusted and that they can, have that flexibility, and flexible work hours would be something we do to back that up. Purpose, really understanding what the bigger mission is, what our vision is, and how they contribute to that with their own goals and objectives. Mastery, and this is a big investment we're doing, but we are training and creating these educational opportunities where people can really master the skill and the art of selling. Everything down from storytelling to discovery questions to closing. So they almost feel like they have this opportunity to carve out from their day-to-day. Let's knock these tasks out and say, okay, let's get into learning mode. Let's get excited and learn something new that I can teach a friend. And then the last one's connectedness. And this is the hardest in a remote work environment. But the ultimate thing that keeps people together is that sense of belonging. And if you look at the best examples and the best teams, they all have this, in the NFL, they call it like a brotherhood. And they do that for a reason, because it's about picking each other up. And there's countless other opportunities. You look at the women's soccer team, you look at a lot of these sports teams as good examples of the ones that are connected and winning. And even the Lakers, it's like when one person gets knocked down, LeBron actually taught one of the rookies this. He's like, no, don't get up. He's like, I got you. I got your back. And he has that, everyone do that. Someone falls, a teammate comes and helps them up, as kind of that symbolic gesture that we're here for one another. We're playing for one another. And that connectedness, if you can do that in a remote work environment, which how we're doing it is we're doing regional summits where we're bringing people together, COVID negative tests, vaccination status. We're doing all the things that we can, and we're investing in that. And that's one of the big things. The other thing is we give autonomy to the area managers and the regional managers to ask the team, what would be like a fun team build that we can support for you guys to go out and do, whether it's, a camping trip, or whether it's going to archery lessons, or whatever, their heart desires. So giving them that opportunity where they can create these, out of work places to learn more about each other, what makes them tick, what are their hopes, their fears, their desires, so that when they're in work and they're in these situations, people don't just look at them as like, oh, this is someone I need to get a task done. It's like, oh, this is Mike, or this is Laura, or this is Janine, and this is what they like. That it creates this sense of community, which is really important.
It certainly is. I mean, being human and connected to the other humans, while it seems so easy, it's certainly, challenging, but those are some really good ideas and strategies, Max, that you've shared. We have another question from the audience. Laura, actually, did you want to add to that?
I mean, those were all awesome ideas too.
Yeah.
I would say the one thing that I feel like has been even a game changer for me as an employee at Bolt is we're really big on feedback. And I know a lot of companies talk about feedback, but this is something that the exec team exemplifies, all the managers. It's a requirement in the one-on-ones to give and receive feedback. And we have a lot of training around that. And I think that that helps a lot with flexing on empathy and flexing on, okay, how do we interact with each other when things don't go well? Because that can be hard, especially remotely. But that's been a big emphasis for us to be able to own our mistakes, ask for help, be able to recognize people when things are going well. Kind of learning how to have those interactions has been really important for us as a company. So I would just add to that. But I have more to say, but I feel like the next question, I know we're running out of time.
Again, great points. And this is probably related to feedback, but overall transparency, where Katrina asked, we've been hearing a lot about transparency and employees really wanting that. Can we get specifics on what that may look like tactically, since a lot of companies are not doing it well? I'll just leave it open.
One of the big,
oh, go ahead.
yeah, Laura, you.
Well, I was just going to say, I feel like there are a lot of decisions that get made, especially right now we're making a lot of big moves as a company. And I feel like one of the best things that our exec team does is they share the decision-making process, or they share how they got to a decision, so that the team feels like they understand why we made a decision or why we're going in this direction. And sometimes that can sound simple, but exec teams, they're always busy. There's always a lot going on. They don't always remember to include the whole team in more of the behind the scenes operations. And the teams always really appreciate it when they're let into, they feel more at the table when you include them in more of the information that usually only stays within an exec team. So.
Totally.
I echo that.
Go ahead, Max.
Laura, you stole the words right out of my mouth. I was going to talk about just the shared decision making and making it fun. One of the things we've done is we actually do incentives. So we'll have a challenge of something that we want to do. And for instance, we wanted to kind of co-create a vision roadmap over the next 10 years. And in order of doing it, everything from the vision statement to the mission statement, instead of it being top down, hey guys, this is it, take it and run with it. We said, hey, this is the baseline. Why don't you guys break out in 3-person groups? The winning group will get $300, and we got 30 minutes on the clock. Let's see what you can do, just making it fun. So that's the kind of enthusiasm, the excitement. And one of the things is finding what are the triggers of flow state? How can we get our team into that flow state more? And it's uncertainty, it's novelty, it's risk. And a lot of our day-to-day is why people get bored and disengaged. There's a lot of a lack of risk. It's a lot of back and forth on email. It's a lot of the same structured calls where people are hopping on and they feel like they've gone through the same thing over and over. So how can you as a leader and as a leadership team change the narrative on that and make it fun and make it where people can earn something? There's a time limit and they get fully engaged, and you're creating a collaboration by having small groups.
Angela, did you want to add to that?
I love that. I think, Max, that's so smart. I mean, that gets to the root of sort of why people may not be totally tuned in, or I was just going to share, I think, Laura, what you shared around, giving transparency also helps people from a change management perspective. I mean, as leaders, whether it's teams or organizations, we make the assumption that, okay, here's where we're going. We're going over here. We've already had weeks, sometimes months to process that. And people hear it for the first time and they're like, well, what the, so I definitely bringing people along on that sort of change making journey. Even if you tell them and you announce something big in a meeting, you say, hey, here's some of the choices. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. Here's some of the the options we evaluated that we didn't choose. And here's why. And it really takes people along on that sort of path with you. I think that's powerful because then they can experience in a hyper accelerated way all that decision-making journey along with you, culminating in here's what we're doing. And just it helps people get there faster.
Awesome. We have a few more questions from the audience. One, Sharon asked, how have you been able to maintain and preserve your culture amidst rapid growth?
I'm happy to speak a little bit to it. I know we weave it into everything we do. So we have touch points when you're being onboarded. We have touch points in our one-on-ones. We have touch points in all our HR processes. But Ryan always says this too, that sometimes we talk about conscious culture or our playbook, or it can sound like this lofty kind of set of ideas that people think that maybe we read and then we just table it and then get to work and then visit the conscious culture playbook once in a while. But it's really brought up all the time. We bring it up when we're making decisions. We bring it up in meetings. He always says it's really setting the expectation for how I show up at work as a teammate and how I expect others to show up as a teammate, and really understanding that is what holds the culture together in the day-to-day, that it's not something that I've been at companies in the past, and I've even fallen prey to this, that I'll do culture projects, or I'll think that I have to visit it once a quarter to be like, okay, what can I do to make the culture better? But really trying to think of how you can weave it into everyday things will help you make sure that you have integrity when you think about efforts towards culture.
Awesome. We have another good question, great question. Where do you look for leadership and cultural inspiration?
I think there's some really great, I mean, we all have our resources. Like, I love the book Reinventing Organizations, which is a non-traditional look at how to build teams and how to empower teams. And but for me, actually, my best inspiration comes from nature, which sounds maybe a little counterintuitive, but I'm a big believer. Like, if we disconnect and we spend enough time, like whether it's running or being in nature or hiking or whatever that is, like, you will reconnect with sort of the spark that brought you to lead in the first place. And I think if you get quiet, that actually is our best source of authentic inspiration. Can be hard to do that when you're in the grind.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Just to piggyback on that, I'm like, oh, I'm going to remember that for myself. I don't know if I talked about this, but I was a psychologist in a past life, like a family therapist. And so I'm biased, but I like the idea that you do your best work when you can show up as your best self at work. And for me, I know if I can be in a hopeful state, or, Max, you were talking about a flow state. I know for me to be able to get in that mode helps me feel like I'm able to work better with people. I'm more productive. If I'm in a fear state, it has the opposite effect. So a lot of the resources that we talk about on consciousculture.org relate to that, whether it's the 15 commitments of conscious leaders, that's a good book. Even going into more of the personal development side of things, the 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, or, really kind of looking at yourself to see what you need as a person to show up as in the way that you want to at work. And I love the nature idea. Like I said, I'm going to remember that today.
A couple quick recommendations. I love sports teams and understanding and dissecting what brings them together in high stakes environments, of how they build that trust and camaraderie. A really great book that I just read that was recommended by our new COO is called Legacy, and it's on what is arguably one of the best cultures in sports, which is the All Blacks out of New Zealand. So if you have time, check out that book. It's really awesome. It kind of breaks down their philosophy of how they design their culture, and once an all Black, always an all Black, of how they kind of keep this alumni and build this legend.
Very cool. Very cool. Any other thoughts before, I know we're potentially wrapping up and it seems like we're right up against the hour here. Katrina, anything, I'll turn it over to you.
I mean, that was such a great conversation. There were just so many things that resonated with me. And I used to just work myself to a point where I would break down. I just really didn't know how to manage myself that well because I'm a very ambitious person, but I've really backed away from that. And I know that one of the things that I've done is really time bound my work time, which I work less, but I'm actually more productive because I can rest. So I think especially a lot of us are working remote and for a lot of our work environments, there's more of a hybrid option, and a lot of us may continue to just be remote. And so I think that's definitely it will become very important, right? Helping our employees and our teams really manage that. But thank you so much for this incredible conversation. And the Naturally Austin forums will also be launching a People and Culture Forum here in the next couple of months. And I also just want to call it that our team is growing, and we've signed the pledge to be a conscious company at conscious.org. So I know that a lot of folks were also wanting to learn more about the playbook that Laura has been talking about. So that's a great place to learn more about that. There are some 10 areas of commitment, and I think that being really intentional and making that very clear to everyone around, the work that you are all intending to do is just a great place to start. So I definitely recommend you all heading over to conscious.org to do that and joining me and becoming a more conscious culture. So we hope that this inspired you today, and we will see you at a Naturally Austin event soon. Sharon, do you have any parting words for us?
Just thanks, everyone. So many pearls of wisdom. I know I walked away with many, many things I'm excited about.
Lots of notes.
Just appreciate you sharing everything. We'll be doing a blog repost and posting the recording to share out with others. So thank you all so much for being with us today.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Sean, Max, Angela,
Thanks,
Laura.
everyone.
Have a great day.
Thank you guys
Bye.
so much. It was great
Sure.
information.